Alrighty, welcome back to another tutorial. So this one will be focusing on adding usability to our camera tracker. So what we're going to be doing is we are going to be mapping sort of a smooth out button to the grip on the Oculus Touch, a screenshot to the trigger. We're going to start and stop the take recorder with one of the buttons. We're going to change lenses with one of the buttons, and we're going to use the joystick to move it around so that you can sort of navigate through your scene without having to walk across a room. So first of all, thank you to I'm not going to try and pronounce his name because I'll screw it up. I was sort of halfway through figuring out the smoothing button and the moving with the joystick, and then he posted on the Unreal virtual production group how he'd done it. So I've slightly modified his setup to get it working how I wanted it to, but sort of all credit should go to him. So without further ado, we shall get started. So what I've got here is our base, sort of what we ended up with from the last tutorial. So if I hit play, we can just see what we've got. So obviously we tracked the camera to the controller, and we mapped to the A button to sort of switch to the camera view. I think the Oculus, it's even shakier than last time. And this is fine, but you can't really give it to someone, especially someone with no Unreal experience, and expect them to use it. So what we're going to do first is we're going to go to the project settings, and we are going to be adding some inputs. So we need to add inputs for everything we are doing. Alright. This is the action mapping I've come up with. So to change to our camera, I've mapped it to pushing down on the thumbstick. To take a screenshot is pull the trigger. To cycle the lens is the A button, which is the bottom button. To start a take is the top button, the B button. And to sort of enable our smooth camera is the grip button. Now, these are action maps in Unreal, so you can add, as many, you can add to a gamepad on an Xbox controller as well. You can add it to keyboard. You can add, so there's quite a lot of, or if you're using the HTC or the Valve Index, then you can change these up however you like. That's the beauty of these action mappings. Next, we need axis mapping for the thumbstick to move around a scene. Now, I think there's either a limitation with how SteamVR and Unreal talk, or something specific to Oculus. I don't have another VR headset at the moment to test, so I can't confirm if it's just limited to Oculus or not. But SteamVR sends inputs, or SteamVR's API sends inputs for the things like thumbsticks in two axes, or they call it vert 2, so it's X and Y, but Unreal can only accept inputs in one vert, which is X or Y. So at the moment you can't actually use the thumbstick as a thumbstick in Unreal, and I spent all day trying to figure a workaround for this, and I'm yet to figure it out. So in our axes mappings, we have to map each direction individually, and we'll be using it essentially like WASD, so it's either pressed or it isn't. Sad, but I can't figure out a workaround. If you can, then great for you. I would love to hear from you on how you did that. Alright, so this is our finished action mapping. So you can just have a look at that, see how it looks. So what we're going to move on to next is we are going to open our level blueprint. So open level blueprint. So in the previous tutorial I said this is how we were changing to view the cine camera. So I figured out what I was doing wrong and why I couldn't get it working in these the blueprint. So we can go ahead and delete this now, as we no longer need it in the blueprint, which means everything is now contained inside this one sort of our one blueprint for the camera, which means you can simply use the asset localization. No, I thought it was asset. Oh, here we go. So we can use the asset actions and migrate to put this in another project, and besides enabling HMD control in the viewport and setting up our action mapping in the project's settings, which we can actually export wherever I find it, input, so we can actually export up here. And so it'll make it a lot easier sort of putting this in a pre-existing project. So you don't sort of have to build around this. So we're going to open it up. And so this is what we got in the blueprint. I'm going to remove that node because we do not need it. So we got this. So we get our device, our track device position and orientation. We turn it into a transform and we set the relative transform. And so remember we had the cinema camera parented to the cube. We were affecting the cube so that we can add an offset to the cinema camera without sort of that overriding it. So first things first, what we need to do is we need to add a... So this whole node setup I'm going to paste in this website. I can't remember, but it'll be in the link in the description. And so you can just copy all of these nodes and paste it in your project. So if you're pretty competent with Unreal, then no need to watch on. You could just take all the nodes as is. However, I'm going to go through and explain everything so that if you're maybe a little newer to Unreal, like I was, then you can understand what everything does, which will obviously give you an understanding of how to fiddle with it. So the first thing we want to do is we want to use an enable input node right here. So this is where I went wrong and why I had to use the level blueprint. And then we also need a player controller. Get player controller, there we go, into here. And then this simply allows the blueprint to receive controls from things, such as our action inputs. So controller input. So I'm going to label everything to keep things organized. So the first thing we want to add back into our functionality is our change camera. So we're going to call the change camera action here. And we are then going to remove context sensitive and add the set view transform, set view, set view target with blend. That's what it was called. So when we press that, we want that. We also want to get the player controller. Now under new target, we actually just want to call a self. So get reference to self because we are what we want to be, like that. And so what I can do is create that and like so. Now we can compile and save and we'll test that out. So I wakey, and then I push down. Remember, we changed it to push down on the thumbstick. We are now the camera. So that works just fine as intended. So what we're going to do next is screenshot. So if I find a sort of a blank space, so we have another action called screenshot. Okay, and then this one's really simple. We simply use a node called screenshot. Take high-res screenshot right above our action. And when we press it, we want to take the screenshot. Now, under resolution, we're going to set it to 1920 by 1080. Be careful setting this to very high values, especially if you have a weak graphics card, as the engine will get hang up, and if it is too large, it'll actually crash it. So we can actually append a file name if we wanted to. If we click down, we have things like HDR and what have you. We're just going to leave them as is, though. And we'll label things. Next is the tricky one, which is sort of smoothing out our camera movements. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to split these up a bit. So we want to get position / orientation. And then this one is set position and orientation. Alrighty. So what we want to do is we get our position, turn it into a transform, and set it. So we sort of want to interrupt in the middle here and add a few more things to smooth out the end result. So to do that, what we need to do is we need to get our relative transform, of the cube, like so. So this is going to return what its transform is before it gets set. So essentially the frame before the current. So this happens very, very quickly. I'm going to remove that unnecessary reference and plug that one in instead. Next we need a float times a float. So next what we need is a lerp, and we want a transform lerp, and so that's going to say take this value and this value, and sort of come up with a middle, sort of like an average between the two of them, and return it here based on this alpha number. So setting it to a 0 is going to be 100% this value, I believe, and setting it to 1 is going to be 100% of this value here. And so we sort of want to, it's like mixing the two, which obviously is going to smooth things out for us. So the last thing we need is a float times a float, float by float, and we are going to plug that into here, and we're going to take the current time in seconds and plug it into our top one. And in the bottom one, we're going to drag it out here and click promote to variable. And we're going to call the new variable, which has been put over here, to smoothness with the correct spelling, like so. And we're going to, before we do anything, so we're going to compile it, and then over here we can set its default value. This is a bit of a fiddly thing. Setting it to 0 means no movement, and setting it to 100 can result in like this weird, almost sped up movement. I found 15 as a nice even ground to start with, but this is something you will have to fiddle with yourself, personal preference. Like so. Keep things organized. And so next we want to control this. Remember, we sort of set our grip button to control this, but at the moment that's not happening. So what over here, we are going to call our action, which we called smooth camera. And we're going to drag the smoothness down here, and we're going to set it, and we're going to do that twice. Set and set. And so when we press it, we want to set it to a lower value, which will mean more smoothness. So even something down to like 1.5. And then when we let go of it, we want to set it back to our default value of 50. Like so. So now if we compile and save and test it out, I just realized we hadn't tested the screenshot either, so it's not too obvious, but then when I hold it, it's really obvious. If we change to the camera view, let's get the headset back in here, there we go. Here we go. So obviously straight away you can see it's a bit less jittery, and then I hold it down and it's really less nice and smooth. And obviously if we pull the trigger, we can test. Ta-da, as you saw there, it took a screenshot. So we're going good. So what else have we got to do? Well, next we can tackle... We've almost tackled everything, I think. Let's have a look, double check what am I missing something? Start take, cycle lens, and move the camera around. So next we can do cycling our lens. This is another thing, I think it doesn't have the correct implementation in blueprints or not. So if you just type lens, you'll see we get these like get lens, set lens. And we end up with this, but there's not actually a whole lot to do with that. Here they all are. And it's a bit hard to... There are a lot of get and only 2 sets. And sort of making these lens presets and stuff, I could not for the life of me work it out. I tried, and it seems like it's just impossible to hook up. But this here is a workaround. So what we'll be using down here, if we go to our Cine camera, you'll see there's actually under lens settings, there's some presets here, and so we can actually use these presets, which is currently what I have set up. So to do this, we first so we'll leave that. So we'll call our cycle lens action, cycle lens, like so. Now we need a way of switching between all the lenses. So you can use what's called a flip-flop, as funny as that sounds. But that only has A or B. So we could only switch between 2 lenses. What we actually want is called a multi-gate, like so. And so this works essentially in the same manner, especially if we tick loop and we leave off is random. And so you can have as many output pins as you want, and you hit it once and it'll go this one, and then this one, and then as many as you have, and when it gets to the end, it's going to loop back around to the start. And then what lastly we want is a set lens preset by name. So obviously our cinema camera is what we are setting. Now, you would be tempted to use a variable here and use a different method for calling this. However, these lens presets, if you have a look, have a decimal place in them, which is an invalid character for variables for some reason. So your way around that is simply duplicate this. So I'm going to duplicate it 4 times 3, 4, like so. And then next we are going to hook up, so we can just reuse this cinema camera reference here for all of them. And then we want 4 pins coming out, and we're going to hook that up to all of them. 3 and 4. And then now we just have to type the name of the lens exactly in this box. So I believe it's 12mm space capital prime space f slash let's have a look, 2.8. 2.8. I'm just going to select that and copy and paste that so I don't have to write that down. Paste, paste, paste. Obviously, next we got 35, 50, and 85. 35, 50, 85. And then what are they? 1.4, then 0.8. Like so. And that's it for how we make that work. Now, I also looked to see if you can make more of these, and I cannot find any information about that either. So again, if you know something which I obviously do not, please share, as it would save me from ripping my own hair out. So cycle. So we can again compile and save it, and we set that button to be the bottom, so the A on the touch controller. So wiki headset, there we go, and so we simply hit one, two, 3, 4. We are missing a lens. I've typed something wrong. Let's have a look. 12, 35, 50, 85. Why is it skipping? Which one is it skipping, actually? 12 prime f 2.8. Oh, wait, no. 35 f 30. Oh, it's 30mm, not 35, so that preset doesn't exist. Compile, save. Now if we play it. Yay! Ta-da! Alright, next on our list is the take recorder. Now, this is something I'll be going more in depth in the third of this tutorial of this series, of how to sort of record this movement to use at a later date. Now, to add that functionality, we actually have to enable the take recorder. So that is in the settings, and it is a plugin under virtual production, all the way down here, and we have take recorder. And so we just have to restart the engine, so make sure you've saved everything. Should take me all of about 10 seconds to relaunch the editor. Hey presto. Alrighty, so next what we have to do is under cinematics, you'll now see take recorder, which is default opened for me over here. So it'll automatically create a sequence if none exists, and you can use the take recorder in an existing sequence, and I'll explain all that in a follow-up tutorial. But essentially we need the window open. The sequence not so much, although that auto opens with the take recorder, but we need the take recorder window in the editor open. So now we're going to go down here, and first we're going to get our action, which is obviously going, I think we called it start take. Start take, there we go. That looks like it's spelled wrong, but I don't know if it is. So you'd be no, it must be. So if we just type start, what you'll notice is there is a start recording under the take recorder here. But if you click on it, this looks a bit confusing and unnecessarily confusing, and some of these don't actually end up working, like sort of like these cast to and sources, and some of these things can't actually be used with anything, which is a bit annoying. Again, they sort of added it without thought of how it would be used. So what we want to do is if we disable context sensitive and search again, you'll actually notice we have two start recordings. We've got start recording here, but then under this panel we have also got start recording, and you'll notice this is a lot simpler. Now if we drag off this one and re-enable context sensitive and sort of pull down the take recorder, we have open take recorder panel. And what this essentially does is when we press it, it says, hey, you know that take recorder we already have open, simply use its settings the way it's set up and hit go. So it's essentially like saying we're just pressing the red record button here, which is a lot easier, but for some reason it's hidden. And so we're just going to connect those up like that. Now we also want to stop it with this one button. Now you can stop it by hitting the escape key and exiting the editor, but the stop recording button right there. So now we need to go between these two. Now the multi-gate would work in this case, but there's no need to use as complex a one. We can just use our flip-flop like so, and so we're going to go in here, and so when we press it the first time, it is going to trigger A, which will start the recording, and when we press it a second time, it is going to go through B and stop the recording. This simply allows us to start and stop at will, which means we can record multiple takes without ever leaving the editor, like the cancelling the play and then starting play again. The play in editor, that's the word I'm looking for. So start, stop, take, recorder. I think that's supposed to be 2 words. Actually, you start Unreal not liking spaces already. Alrighty. So we're almost done our functionality. So we'll test this. We can compile and save it. So to use the take recorder, a quick overview, simply first we need to add what we want to record. So we're just going to click on our track camera, and then we're going to go from add source from actor and add the track camera. And as you can see, the record button has just been enabled. So if I hit play, so you don't actually have to be looking through the camera for this to record. But all we have to do, like I will look through the camera, maybe set a nice wide angle lens, and then when we just hit B, it'll count us down and start recording in a sequence. And then because we set it up, we can simply hit B again and it'll stop. Just like that. And then, you know, it's moved back to the start of the sequence. So if we've already had a sequence with animation in it, then, you know, we can just do another take. Very handy. So the last thing, which is the most complex thing, is moving the camera around. So to start that, we're going to add a new component. I'm going to use an arrow, but we can use a cube again. It doesn't matter too much. And we're going to take our existing cube and make it a parent of the arrow. So the way this now works is the arrow represents the floor, the VR floor, or the real world floor. And we're simply moving the VR floor, or VR room, I guess, around in the world. The cube is then moving inside that room with the motion controller tracking, and then the cinema camera is moving based on the cube but with its own offset for however you have your camera set up. So it's a bit complicated, a bit Inception-y, but that is how that works. Just trust me on this one. It works, and it works fine. And I think this is, from my understanding, the best way of doing this. There may be another way. So what we are going to do then is call our actions. So remember, we set up action groups. Where are they? Engine input. So we set up all these axes mappings. Again, because of Steam VR doesn't like the using the normal axes mappings. So what we are going to do is we're going to call our action, which I think the first one's called forward. And we're just going to call all of them. So forward, backward, backwards, right and left, and left, like so. And then we're going to use an add relative transform, and we're going to be going to our arrow. So add relative location. So we are taking what its location already is in the world, and we're just adding to it. So we also need this 4 times. 2, 3, 4. Like so. That's that there. Try and make things nice and neat so that you can find things later. Like so. And so we want the arrow for the target for all of them. So just connect that up like that. Now so this is essentially like an event tick. It just calls every frame. That's why there's no pressed or not pressed event for it. So technically we'd run these all off 1 if we want to, but this just works out. It looks nicer. Next, what we want is a float. No. We want a vector times a float, not the other way around. Here we go, vector times a float, and we want that 4 times. 2, 4. Put that down there, and so this is going to determine sort of where our this arrow, and so our entire setup will move in the world and how fast. So we'll take the axes value. So this is going to return. So normally this would return something anywhere between 0 and 1. So obviously change speed because a thumbstick can sort of be halfway. But in this case, because of the way Steam VR sets up, this is going to be a 0 or a 1. So sort of like a yes moving or no moving. So we'll plug all those in. And then what we want to do is we are multiplying it by our transform. And so this number determines how quickly it moves. So if we set 10, it'll move very quickly in the world. And if we set 1, it'll move very slowly in the world. So I found 2 is a nice value. And so what we have to do, I think these actually are supposed to go. You may need a bit of fiddling to figure out which ones go in which. But essentially it's, so like the forward will be 2, and then the backwards will be -2, because obviously we want to move in the wrong direction. And then the same for right and left, but in the Y column. And what we return is a location value, which we are going to plug into this node. And hey presto. Whoops. Now, push all these into a group. Like so. Compile and save. Now, if we play in the editor, you may notice something. Especially if you've skipped ahead. It doesn't do anything. Wonder why. That is, again, the way Steam is interpreting the Oculus controller. Because obviously, apparently, it can't do it the right way. So, what we have to do is if we go to Project Settings and scroll all the way to the bottom, there is one under Plugins, there is one for Steam VR. And it can be easier if you just click Show Steam VR Input in Toolbar. So this is what I was looking for in the last tutorial. This is now off by default in Unreal. So you can do that, or you can just do it through here. So what we want to do is we want to regenerate the action manifest, regenerate the controller bindings, and then launch Steam VR Bindings dashboard. It's okay, you don't have to do this once. And so now we have our bindings for this quote-unquote game and what controller it's using. So we want to edit the current binding, and if you have a look down here, it has picked up all our stuff. Under here you might see mode. Its mode is click. This is emulating the HTC Vive's what are they? They're called like the pad things. So it's like you sort of put your finger on sort of like a D-pad and then push down on one of those things. And as you can see, that's what Steam VR is using the D-pad. You use as D-pad. Now, the problem is the Oculus, that sort of means you got to like push it in and then push it up or something. It's a bit awkward. All we want to do is we want to hit the edit on all of these and change it to touch and then tick. Edit, touch, tick. Edit, touch, tick. And edit, touch, tick. For some reason, putting all of these actions in one of these used D-pads doesn't work for some reason. So I don't know why. I'm a bit new to this still. So we can just hit Save Personal Binding and hit Save. And we can close this now. And then back in Unreal, we just want to click Reload Action Manifest. And then close. And now if we play and hit ta-da. So the right and left are the wrong way around. Let's just quickly fix that. So this one has to be a negative value, and this one has to be the positive value. Let's have 50-50 on that one. What poor luck. So now we can move around the world. And, you know, obviously you can change the speed you want. You could even do like we did with the flip-flop for the, not the flip-flop, the, here. You could do like a flip-flop, or you could just do the press and release to set the speed value. You can set this, obviously, you can turn this into a variable if you'd like and have two different ones. So, you know, obviously we press a button and it moves quicker, or release it and it moves slower again. It's, you could probably, I wonder if we could run it off that. You know, I'll let you figure that out, but use this as a hint. So, but that is how that is done. And so I've labeled everything. Again, I'm going to paste it on that UE4 paste thing. So you can just copy and paste it. But that is how all that is set up. So now you can understand it, and you know which values you can fiddle with to get things just how you like them. Because everyone is different. But, you know, we've added quite a lot of functionality to this little AA powered controller, which we can obviously integrate into a bigger rig. You can add the second touch controller if you want even more controls. You throw in an Xbox controller. The world is your limit. So thank you for watching. There is one more tutorial I plan on making about this, which is I'll be taking a pre-existing scene and then putting this in and showing you how to use this in sort of in like a production, for a production, rather than in just this test scene. So keep an eye out for that. That might be a couple of days, because I want to get someone in to who actually knows what they're doing to help with the camera movements and what have you. But other than that, thank you for watching.